Officer at StartUp Health. So excited to be here with everyone today and introduce this fantastic group of health transformers. I'm going to just allow you to each introduce yourself. Please tell us about your company, your moonshot vision, and just a brief little interesting fact about you.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm Monica Schmeide, co-founder and co-CEO of Athelo Health. We are the first biometric-based virtual coach for women with breast and gynecologic cancers. And our vision is to democratize integrative cancer care and to complement all of the amazing therapeutics that we've been developing over the last century. Fun fact about me personally, I'm a free diver. I'm a big ocean enthusiast, so when I'm not at the computer working with investors and customers and patients, I'm down about 100 feet just hanging out with all the sea creatures. So happy to be here.
Love that.
Hi everyone, I'm Sathya Elumalai. I'm the founder and CEO of Aidar Health. We are a digital medicine company. As a part of our solution, we have a platform and a single integrated device that measures around 12 health parameters in under a minute. It's more like a breathalyzer. You breathe into the device and it measures parameters like temperature, blood pressure, ECG, and everything has been validated, FDA cleared, CE mark approved, and basically we're using that to actually, right now, to help create behavior change. Can we actually utilize biomarkers as a great tool to actually create that sustainable behavior change, especially with patients with chronic conditions? Probably my fun fact is I love dancing, so I've spent a lot of years learning salsa dancing, so if you guys are interested, I'll meet you guys after.
We're going to see a demonstration, right?
Absolutely.
Hi there. I'm Satish, Movva, CEO and founder of CarePredict. CarePredict is a predictive analytics company for senior care. And our unique twist on how we track and predict health issues with seniors is that we track activity and behavior signals using a wearable device that goes on the wrist that knows when somebody's eating, when they're bathing, when they're cooking, quality of the sleep, heart rate, pulse ox, and it also connects to a whole host of FDA-approved devices as well. So it kind of becomes a central hub on your arm that allows us to predict, for example, just by looking at activity and behaviors, UTIs 4 days ahead of time, depression 5 days ahead of time, or the risk of a fall in the next 24 hours. And it's been peer-reviewed and published studies at the National Library of Medicine on the efficacy of the device. So we're very happy to be here. Thank you very much, Katya.
Quick question. Can you all hear? Okay, cool. Satish, did you have a fun fact about yourself?
Oh, yeah. Fun fact, scuba diving. And my current passion is really helping students at a high school and coaching them on Science Olympiads. So if you guys are familiar with Science Olympiads, I coach a couple of the events there. And we just came back from our state competitions in Florida where the kids won gold medals. So we're really happy.
Nice. Hi, everyone. My name is Anish. I'm the founder and CEO of Babyscripts. I'll start with my fun fact. I'm a twin, so that's something you should know about me. But I think more interesting fact is that I was not born in the United States. I was born in a hospital in India, and it turns out that my outcomes there are better in a lot of cases in the United States. That leads into Babyscripts a little bit. Today, I think as a country and as a nation, we do a pretty poor job of taking care of our pregnant mothers. If you look at numbers around maternal morbidity, mortality, they're on the rise. So Babyscripts, we have a technology platform that enables providers of care to remotely monitor pregnancies, and by which they can improve the access to care and ultimately improve the outcomes. So that's a little bit about me. So.
Thanks, Anish. And I'll stick with you since you kicked off the topic. And obviously the theme of our panel is remote patient monitoring, different ways that we can leverage technology and the platforms that these folks are building to make an impact and improve outcomes. But when we're talking about equity, and you know at StartUp Health we have a health equity moonshot, and it's an area that we're integrating into every single moonshot and really focused on. We can't just be helping the people who already have an Apple Watch or a Fitbit. We need to be focusing on helping everyone and reducing these health disparities. So when it comes to Babyscripts, how are you making sure that the people who have the worst outcomes have access to Babyscripts, and you know, how are you how are you making sure that that's happening?
Yeah, first of all, just to kind of reinforce the stats, if you're black or brown, your probability of having an adverse outcome is significantly higher. So that's a problem, first and foremost, that we should all acknowledge. I mean, I think we believe that if you are able to get the care out of like the four walls of an office, into the patient's home, into their pockets, you're able to create a much better experience for the mom, right? And I'll just give you an example in prenatal care, right? So, typically there's about 13, 14 appointments that folks come in for. Now, if you're someone that has to take time off of work, has to try and get some childcare, pay for parking, get to the major sort of hospital center, for a 15-minute appointment when all of that could be done at home relatively easily, it's sort of a no-brainer. So I think it's just silly that the antiquated concept of need-or-need appointments still is the driving force of a lot of the decision-making today. And I think particularly for users in pregnancy, I mean, these are 18 to 35-year-olds. I mean, they use Facebook and TikTok, right? They're millennials, right? So I definitely think the train's leaving the station, and it's a rising tide that lifts all boats, right? So in addition to improving quality and outcomes, is doing it for everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, or gender, or socioeconomic status.
And Satish, we've talked a little bit about, obviously, you've got such a great solution that has fantastic outcomes in terms of reducing hospital readmissions and many, many other things. But it's really hard to work with Medicaid, for example. You're going state by state, county by county. Talk to us a little bit about, you're really striving to reduce inequities, but the challenges in commercializing in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Especially in senior care, you have the folks with the good insurance who are taken care of, but then you have this vast population that are either dual eligible, Medicare, Medicaid, or, primarily just Medicaid or indigent care. And it becomes very hard to reach those people and provide the same quality and caliber of services you could provide other people that are much more accessible. So, in general, that's been a forgotten population for a very long time. But the way we are working with that is, some of these states like Indiana, Ohio, they actually have specialized programs that allow for predictive analytic systems like ours to be deployed to Medicaid populations, which are actually funded by the state. I mean, you still have to work with the county waivers and the state waiver boards and things like that. But what that's allowing them to do is it allows them to finally provide services to these folks who are living at home, who are very old, who are frail, but don't have the wherewithal to go see doctors. They don't have transportation. They don't have family members that can take them there. There are a lot of equity issues there. It allows them to, in a sense, remotely monitor the condition of these people in their home and be able to direct a home visit to their home so they don't have to go and visit a healthcare professional. I wish a lot more states were doing it. Right now, we are working with Ohio and Indiana. They have fairly nicely defined programs that allow devices like ours to be reimbursed and to be deployed into these populations.
And Monica, I know Athelo has huge implications for health equity. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and some of the work you're doing with Medicaid populations?
Sure. So to provide some context, my co-founder and I come from the clinical trial background. And as far as trials go, we do collect a vast amount of data on patients from age, demographic. We do a lot of testing to monitor heart conditions. But a lot of these patients do come from Eastern European descent. And so we realize that there's a large gap in the data set that exists for a lot of studies where we're not capturing a representation picture of patients that will be on these drugs. And even more so, we know that women experience much more severe side effects. For oncology treatments overall, it's about 30% more experience severe side effects. And for immunotherapy, they're about 54% more likely to experience severe side effects. So my co-founder and I realized this working in the industry and thought, why is no one doing something about this? We have the data, we know it's there, it's not being communicated to patients. We need to build a tool that can support the 92% of cancer patients who are not enrolled in clinical studies. So we've taken a step back and built something that partners with all wearable devices, both 510K pathway devices as well as Fitbits, Apple Watches, and we're taking that data to look at things like HRV, activity, to understand, what can we recommend to a patient to make them have a better experience? Do they need more activity, less activity? We've built a virtual community as well as a content library, and so I think it's founded on our experiences of being different. I'm a first-generation American. My co-founder is a member of the Wampanoag Sioux tribe, so we come from just a different background, and I think for a while we thought, that was maybe a disadvantage and we should not talk about that as much, but we realized it is an advantage because we have a different perspective on this. So I think the health equity part is really founded and baked into everything we do. So it's being addressed from the ground up, and then we're working with programs to partner with Medicaid patients in particular, because we don't want to work with patients who may have the resources, but look at other areas and maybe a more difficult pathway, but a more rewarding one to say, how can we work with Medicaid and other patients that don't have access to this type of integrative care.
Hey, Katya, would you mind if I ask the audience a question? Is that okay?
Go ahead.
Just by show of hands, how many people in the audience have an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, a smartwatch of some kind, track some kind of health on their phone? Okay, so everyone that put their hand up, you guys are remotely monitoring some element of your health, right? Now, if I asked you the question, how many of you are being remotely monitored by your care team, I think the hands will be a little less, right? And really at the heart of it, that's the problem folks on this stage are trying to solve, which is we're all doing it, guys, right? So let's figure out those business models, those adoption cycles, to take stuff that's already happening and bring it into the healthcare delivery system. So sorry, I didn't mean to go off tangent there. So.
I love it. And Monica, what if someone doesn't already have a Fitbit? How do you address that?
Sure. So we have procured a certain number of Fitbits for those who do not have them, because exactly as Anish said, so about 46% of Americans do have a wearable device as of last month, a study done by Rock Health and Stanford. But those people tend to be younger, healthy individuals, wealthier, and so we see that those who are the sickest really need it most, and they don't have it. So although we are seeing more wearable devices, it's not equally distributed, particularly amongst those patient populations who could most benefit. So yes, we are definitely addressing that, and that's the core of what we're doing.
That's awesome. Love to hear that. So Sathya, tell us a little bit more about what you're doing with Aidar, and I know that you hit some major milestones during the pandemic. You crossed a bunch of thresholds with regulatory approvals, and you're really the only device of its kind on the market. So there's huge implications for what you all can achieve once you get your device into the hands of a lot of people. Tell us a little bit about the outcomes that you're seeing so far, and also a little bit about costs, because I want to talk about costs with all of you. When we're talking to customers, that's really how you're going to move the needle.
Oh, absolutely. I think we were talking about a lot of wearables and other things, right? So it's still challenging because my mom doesn't have a wearable, and if I expect her to recharge her wearable every day, it's not really happening. Two of the major challenges is adherence and persistence, and what we are trying to address is like how can we pair one habit with another habit, which is what we did with our device. Is it's more like a toothbrush, exactly like an electric toothbrush every day. Today my mom uses it. She picks it up the device. Once she brushes her teeth, she just uses our device, and then that's it, boom. The device also has speakers and microphones, so you can actually use it to communicate with your loved ones in their own language. So today my mom hears my voice every day in my native language, so that she can understand, she can like actually comprehend, and also feel like a sense of interaction. And it's not just with me, like it's also with her physicians or any kind of care providers who are involved in this care circle. So that's one thing we did. And then for like maybe 6 years, we've been working on building this device. So whatever we say at that point doesn't make any sense until the device is validated. So once we got our FDA clearance, CE mark, ISO, and MDSAP certifications, that's when we started working on like how can we use this device to provide some outcomes to patients. So today, as simple as using this once or twice a day, we are actually showing them what are the parameters that are relevant to the patients, and then how these parameters can actually help them to change their behavior slightly. So in that way, they actually communicate ahead of time and not just wait till the last minute or just get hospitalized. So right now we're working with the VA to actually help bring this technology to all the veterans out there. So already we are seeing a lot of, feedback from them every day. We got like veterans calling us and saying, hey, how can I do more? I mean, can I take more measurements? We were like, okay, that's great. So we are trying to actually help improve like the quality of care that is provided. And also there's a lot of companies that are doing home care, right? Everybody is sending cars and then people home, but there's nothing there that to tell them what level of severity it is. And that's where we come in. It's more like an ADT system for healthcare, where we can actually push the information so that we can prioritize what kind of care is given.
And for those not familiar, what are some of the top conditions that you're assessing with your device and that are really relevant to people?
So right now we are focused on heart failure, COPD, chronic kidney disease, asthma, and also hypertension.
That's awesome. And Satish, you have a lot of great data around both outcomes and cost. And so I think you're a great use case and example for RPM, and maybe you can share some of that.
Yeah, certainly. So, again, like I mentioned, the way we approach RPM is really a whole person monitoring platform where we track not just vitals, but also activities and behaviors. And what we found was that activities and behavior changes are the absolute best precursors to actual declines in health. So things like if somebody is going into a UTI, their activity and behavior around bathroom visit duration and frequency changes. It's very subtle, but it does change. And we can track those subtleties and be able to say, okay, this person in 3.9 days is going to have a clinical diagnosis of UTIs. And what that's really allowed us to do is start thinking of the person not as a patient, but as a whole person. What are their activities and behaviors, and how do you really know how one of these seniors is truly aging? Because the depressing part of aging in America today is that a lot of the folks are aging in isolation. In the old days, we all aged in a group. We always had eyes on each other. We had social supports. But today, a lot of us are aging in isolation. And so the ability to know how they're truly living, are they eating like they should, are they bathing, are they doing all the other normal things, is super important to understand their quality of life. And so, going back to that UTI example, if you can, it's the third largest expense in the United States for women over 70, right? And if you catch a UTI in the first 24 hours, you could solve it with an oral dose of antibiotics, Bactrim for $10, urinalysis for another $40, and a nurse visit, another $50. So less than $100, you could have addressed that UTI before it becomes septic in 36, 48 hours, and at which point you have to go and put this person in a hospital, give them IV-infused antibiotics, and you just made them drug resistant to future bouts of UTI. So the cost differential is huge. $100 versus $50,000 is the difference 4 days makes in a UTI. That's the kind of effect you can have if you catch things early enough just by looking at activities and behaviors.
That's great. And Anish, your company is actually an example I use a lot because, pregnancy being a bundled payment, and then the doctors are able to use those slots that you're saving them of seeing patients for other, money-making slots. So it's sort of a win-win for everyone. But what other outcomes and data have you been sharing lately? I know you guys have been sharing some really great data around saving money.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fact that the NICU is one of the most expensive things in all of healthcare. So anything that can drive costs down from a NICU standpoint will always have a positive impact and a good ROI, right? And as Satish was saying, the cost of stuff that we do, a blood pressure cuff, a weight scale, an app, is an order of magnitude less than a few hours in the NICU, right? So that ROI is super clear. But to your point, I think, Katya, a lot of what we also focus on is just saving time and energy and removing some of the burden of like day-to-day routine care for providers, right? So, if things can be automated away, it then gives time back to the providers that they can then use to see other stuff that might be, more higher RVU, or hell, just get back home for dinner in time, right? That's the other piece of it. We're hearing about, burnout and workflow retention issues as a major driver of concern. I think remote patient monitoring can also address that in a major way.
I'll just jump in there. We hear that a lot from our advisors. Our lead oncology advisor, Dr. Ajit Gadra, he points out, I'm on my 5th sleep lecture of the day. And so as you point out, they're simply being regarded to someone who can repeat the same general advice pieces every single day instead of, like you say, having more meaningful clinical analysis of a patient. So you're right. I think that's where we stand, and we're unique in that we're supporting the patients and the clinicians so they can do more meaningful work while preventing burnout. So yeah, I love how you said that.
And what I love about the category that you're all in is it's really about meeting people where they are and taking the paradigm of healthcare out of, it's just when you're visiting the doctor, it's just when you're in the hospital. And in your case, Monica, it's just when you actually have cancer. And what I love, one of the things that you're doing at Athelo is really focusing also on the experience when people are in remission. Maybe you can share a little more about that, because that's such a huge gap where people just drop out of the system and feel totally alone.
Absolutely. And it's a great problem to have. We have over 3 million breast cancer survivors in the U.S. alone. About 90% of women who go through treatment do enter remission. And so given this, there is the flip side of people experience a reoccurrence of disease. And so a lot of people don't realize, but things like HRV and measuring the time between your heartbeats can indicate whether or not you're showing signs of a reoccurrence. And so what we're doing is allowing patients to first understand this concept, and then secondly, take a view of their daily biometrics, and they can have perhaps a sense of peace to know, actually, I'm trending in the right direction, rather than being in the dark and waiting for that scan, like you said, every 6 months. So I think a lot of what we're doing is not just looking at data and machine learning, which excites us every day, but it's actually distilling that down and just pulling out the relevant pieces so that we can support patient education and giving clinicians just snapshots that are actionable. So yeah, thank you.
That's fantastic. And obviously technology moves really fast, including sensors and remote patient monitoring. What are you all doing to stay ahead of the curve? And anyone want to talk about the future for your companies?
Yeah, I can jump in because we started off as a hardware company, right? So our objective has always been like, how can we collect hundreds and thousands of health parameters from an individual so that we can give a 360-degree view of somebody's health? And that's why we decided to go use mouth as a source. Because of the access to breath and saliva. Today we are collecting information from the breath, saliva, blood vessels in the lips, and also the lips and hand. So the future is we are adding a lot more sensors, especially from breath-based sensors and saliva-based sensors. So you don't have to send a sample to some lab to get the data, but rather you get your data every day and like insights on the same day. So our goal is like, how can we take all these things? So for example, applications like in cancer care, right? So we have a very interesting application in terms of how can we use this device to help with CAR T therapy, especially looking into cytotoxicity, how we can give this device, measure the baseline, and from there onwards, continue to follow after the treatment so that we can look into various aspects of health so it can manage remission, and also if there is a relapse, we can actually provide that, and we can work with there to actually use their navigators to help our patients to understand what's happening with their health. So definitely in this space, there's a lot of innovations coming in, but we are more focused on once a day or twice a day measurement, but collecting a lot more information.
Yeah, from our perspective, I completely agree with Sathya as well. I think the future is going to be much more about continuous measurements as well of certain parameters. The vitals, yes, intermittent is fine, but I think you do need some model of continuous measurements. The more telemetry we have from the human being, the more we can actually predict what the health outcomes are going to be. And I think the way things are going with the folks living a lot longer with a lot more chronic conditions. But on the flip side, we don't have enough caregivers out there to take care of all of us as we age. We certainly don't have enough money in our healthcare system. So we do need at some point to start having people provide data so those who need the care can be given the care immediately, and they are, it speaks to the equity side of the angle as well, that people who need the care get it, and people who don't need the care don't have to consume the resources that otherwise might be spent on them.
Anish, what does the future look like for Babyscripts? If you could wave a magic wand and have just maximum impact, whether that's about outcomes, but also what do you think your technology will look like in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, I actually think the term like remote patient monitoring is some ways it does a little bit of disservice. You have this concept of like someone in this remote like village or something like that trying to get care. I mean, the reality is I call it hybrid care. That's what this is all about. And an area that we're pretty excited about is the postpartum time period, where I think literally every mom and every patient could get involved in hybrid care, right? When you have a 5-day-old, you don't want to get in a car or a train and go back to the hospital for an appointment that honestly could be done entirely virtually, right? So I think the first 3 months after the delivery happens is also a very critical time period to capture those risks where there are a lot of gaps in care today. So that is an incredibly exciting area for us, and we're doing a lot of work there, both in mental health, wraparound services, and all kinds of stuff there. But at the end of the day, it's all about, just using everyday modalities to just deliver care. I also agree with, both Satish and Sathya about just increasing more telemetry. I think that'll have an overall benefit to the ecosystem. So.
I could write a book about the care I did not receive right after having babies. It's pretty much, you're on your own. What about you, Monica? What does the future look like for Athelo? If you could really just wave a magic wand.
Sure. I mean, I think the whole wearable concept will evolve and we won't even notice it's happening. But also, I think things like value-based care will be completely integrative. And now we're at this point where we're really at the forefront of these policies. Remote patient monitoring wasn't really a thing 10 years ago, and now it has its own codes, and we're still developing more and more. So I think there's going to be an alignment of stakeholders, and we're in this place of the U.S., 360 million people, the largest spend in healthcare really in the world, and so we're at this inflection point where we can really drive the policy change, and we can show value, and we have the data now to demonstrate that this does decrease cost, which is the goal for most stakeholders in this space, and I think it's going to be seamless for all patients to have this data collected, and I think early detection is really the goal. You're not going to have to go into the ER with an episode. You're going to have much earlier signs that say something is wrong, and you'll get care in a much more relaxed manner and ultimately decrease a lot of emergencies. So yeah, we're very excited about that.
As we're closing out, I was just thinking as well that Satish and Anish have been part of StartUp Health for a long time now and have seen you all grow your companies, really successfully over the years, but it was not easy. It's never easy for any of us. Are there any big lessons you would share with entrepreneurs just starting out? There are some earlier stage entrepreneurs here as well, particularly those selling to, the industry. You started out, I remember, Anish, you guys starting out saying, we got to get a lot of doctors on this, we got to get a lot of people on this so that payers will pay, for example. Any big advice that you could share for fellow entrepreneurs fighting the fight?
Yeah, I was joking. Satish and I have more gray hair than, that side of the panel, so that's proof. I think, to be honest, I think, things that I would sort of encourage folks to have is just a lot of just grit and perseverance. I know it's a little cliched, but you just have to have this wherewithal to push through all the obstacles that you run into. I also think having a really thought out and solid narrative is important. I think that goes a long way. And then just a bias towards action, just don't worry about if it's right or wrong, just do it and learn from it. So, nothing novel or, revolutionary there. It's just stuff that people told me that I found to be helpful. But it is hard. It's definitely hard. But it's worth it and it's very rewarding. So.
what he said.
Sathya, you have something to add there?
Yeah, no, I think I would say incremental growth is important. It's also very essential to start with a very small objective and say, okay, here is what we are trying to solve, instead of going and saying we are doing everything for everyone. For example, in our device case, like we spent like 6 years building the ideal device, but that's not always required, right? You start with 1 or 2 and then show value. So I think as long as you can show outcomes, start small.
Well, you all have grit, or you wouldn't be on this stage, all 4 of you. So that's not exactly something you choose. It's a requirement for sure. I want to thank you for the hard work you're doing, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks everyone for being with us today.
Thank you, Katya.